All right, good morning. Thanks for being here today. Data centers are making headlines across the country. Residents are concerned about the strain on our water systems, on our power supply, on air pollution, and noise pollution. An overarching theme is public participation, public input. Public trust requires public conversation. Here in St. Louis County, we want to make sure that we are prepared for when a data center proposal comes in front of county government. With the demand for these facilities across the country, we know that that's only a matter of time. Locally, we've seen standing room only crowds in our neighboring counties. We know that data centers are essential for the way we do business, the way we communicate, the way we educate, and they are essential for national security. AI is no longer a novelty, but it's really a growing part of everyday life. With the technology, data centers are needed to run the digital world, and we are not anti-technology, but we are responsible with the environment. We must respect our neighbors, and we must be open and honest with the public. Last night, the St. Louis County Planning Commission held a public forum to talk about and to hear about some of the proposals from the Planning Department about changes and ideas for the St. Louis County Zoning Code for an update. Part of that conversation was about regulation for data centers. Members of the public can submit written comments about changes in the zoning code or about data centers to planning@stlewiscountymO.gov. That's planning@stlewiscounty.mo.gov. We'll be promoting this through our social media channels, but we also hope that our partners in the media will help us get the word out too. Currently, our zoning ordinances in St. Louis County do not address data centers. But as land use requests change, we know that it's only a matter of time before we see a data center proposal in front of St. Louis County. But it's important to note that as of today, right now, there are no data center proposals in front of St. Louis County government. St. Louis County Zoning Code is responsible for unincorporated St. Louis County, which is about 1/3 of St. Louis County residents. This is mostly unincorporated areas, mostly in North County and South County. Today, I'm joined by Jacob Tremble, who is the Director of Planning for St. Louis County, who will talk about some of the changes in the zoning code that were discussed at last night's public hearing. Jacob.
Thank you, Dr. Page. As the Director of Planning, my primary focus is ensuring that land use laws keep pace with technological shifts before they impact our residents. To be clear, as Dr. Page stated, there are no data center proposals at this time submitted to St. Louis County. However, our zoning ordinance does not define or list data centers as a specific land use. This effort is about closing that gap proactively rather than reacting to a project when it arrives on our desks. I want to emphasize that this is a coordinated effort across county government. The Department of Planning is partnering closely with the county executive and with the county council to ensure that any new regulations reflect both our technical planning standards and the priorities of our residents. We are working in tandem to build a framework that protects the interests of all St. Louis Countyans. Our research is looking at the growth of large-scale and hyperscale facilities that support cloud computing and the AI infrastructure. These developments have generated significant public concern elsewhere due to their unique infrastructure demands. In coordination with the county's Planning Commission, my staff will be focusing on several key pillars. First is infrastructure and the environment. We are evaluating energy demands, water usage, and discharge quality. We will be coordinating with our utility partners to ensure that the local grid and water capacity are protected. And secondly, neighborhood compatibility. We're looking at standards for noise levels, for building design, landscaping, buffering, to ensure that such facilities would be compatible with surrounding land uses, most notably with residential neighborhoods. It's important to note that these regulations will apply specifically to the unincorporated portions of St. Louis County. This process is research-driven. From now through June, the planning team will conduct technical research and meet with subject matter experts. In July, we will begin drafting formal regulatory language with a tentative goal to present that draft to the public at an additional public hearing on August 10th, where we will collect further in-person public input. But we want to hear from the community now while we are in the research phase. Residents can submit their written comments both to planning@stlouiscountymo.gov, but we have stood up a specific email address, datacentercomments@stlouiscountymo.gov. That's datacentercomments@stlouiscountymo.gov, where residents can submit their comments starting today all the way through the end of August. Additionally, we have launched a dedicated project website on the department's webpage where you can track our progress and which will house all of our research materials. That can be found at stlouiscountymo.gov/planning. And as we do more items will start popping up on that website for residents and stakeholders alike to see. We look forward to a process that is transparent, thorough, and inclusive of the public's input. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
So what's the process for, you get the draft done in August, you collect public comment, and then does it go to the council? How does that work?
It does. So once the Planning Commission receives a draft from the Planning Department staff, they will then act upon it and they will formalize a recommendation. That recommendation is then forwarded to the county council, who has the ultimate authority and discretion and responsibility to pass that, so that it would be introduced as a bill and go through the regular legislative process.
They already have, Councilwoman Webb seems to have an idea because she wants to introduce legislation regarding data centers. Have you been communicating with her on that? Or?
We will be working in coordination with any initiatives of the county council.
Where could they go? I mean, there's not a lot of open room in St. Louis County, I imagine. Is that why you haven't gotten a request yet or a proposal yet?
Well, I can't speak necessarily to why we haven't received a request yet, but we are looking at where are the appropriate places for where these should go. So this research is intended to answer the question of what portions of St. Louis County are appropriate, what's the appropriate process by which this could be permitted and reviewed, and to go from there, ultimately making that those calls through this regulatory process. So a lot of that is to be researched and determined.
There have been no proposals to this point, but has any data center company reached out to just express interest of saying, hey, we want to explore bringing a data center to unincorporated St. Louis County?
No, I haven't heard from anybody who is interested in a data center in unincorporated St. Louis County. We're doing this, we've been talking about this for 6 months. This is part of the rewrite of the zoning code that is really a follow-up to the comprehensive planning process that we just completed last year. It had always been anticipated. And we hope to address data center regulations before we have to think about how it might apply to a particular project.
Dr. Page, how do you balance, as you said, AI is just a part of life these days and we need data centers to process, but you've looked around and seen the coverage of the fierce opposition to data centers. Look at Festus, they voted several council members out of office after they supported it. How do you balance the technology and the need for that sort of technology with knowing that there's such fierce opposition?
Well, this is a complex policy question, and history is dotted with them, and they're resolved with public conversation and public engagement, and that's what we're going to do. There's an information gap, there's an understanding gap, and we're going to close that with a lot of conversation. We're going to engage folks and make sure they understand that we follow the principles of minimizing the impact on the water supply and the power grid, being responsible with those, and being responsible for noise pollution and air pollution, recognizing that we need AI to run the digital world. So this is a balance of competing interests, like any land use question, between a landowner and a neighbor, and that's what we do in local government. We manage these complex questions. We have an advantage to get in front of this from a policy standpoint without a proposal the shadow of a proposal. We're going to take advantage of that, and we're going to address this. The right process to change the zoning code in St. Louis County is for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation and then send that to the County Council, who will accept that by ordinance or send it back. That process won't get to the County Council until August, which is well after the election cycle, so it will be a much different environment.
Any thoughts on Jamestown Mall site as a possible location?
I haven't heard about any proposals for Jamestown Mall. That's an open, undeveloped area in North County, but I have not heard yet of a proposal. Hasn't made it to me.
Does that make sense as a possible location? I know you're ahead of the planning.
Yeah, I'm not ready today to speculate on any sites. There's a lot of pieces that go into a potential location, like the water supply and the power supply. You need a much more robust power, not a normal power supply, into a data center site. And then you have to look at the surrounding areas and understand how they might be impacted. And I haven't seen that, and I don't think anybody's brought that to my attention anyway, for any location in St. Louis County. What we're hoping to do is a natural progression of our comprehensive planning process that we just finished last year, which was a 3-year project. A natural progression of that is to look at the entire zoning code. And that's what our planning department has done. And it's natural that we would look at data centers because they're not addressed. And we have the luxury of looking at this without the shadow of a data center proposal hanging over us.
Would you consider, we saw in St. Charles, they did a moratorium while they're working on regulations. The city did the conditional use process. If while these regulations are being created, a company were to come forward expressing interest in a data center and make a proposal, will you guys outright ban any data center development until these regulations are ready?
You know, I'm not really worried about banning conversation about data centers because it's not in front of us, it's hypothetical. And I think we have time to thoughtfully consider recommendations, to thoughtfully engage the public in the next 3 months, and to get some guidelines for data centers before we get a proposal. And I think that timeline would work well. There's nothing in the pipeline that I have heard of yet for anything in unincorporated St. Louis County.
What do you think would be the best option for a data center if it were to come to the county? I mean, what kind of guidelines do you think need to be going into place to make it better for everyone?
Well, I'm going to look to the experts in the planning department and on the planning commission to come up with some proposed guidelines and zoning code, and then I am going to depend on a very engaged and robust conversation with our community to figure out what works best that balances the traditional competing interest in a zoning question, and that's the interest of the landowner and the concerns of their neighbors. And I'm not about to try and come up with those from my hip pocket. We're going to let the process work. We're going to let the experts make recommendations, and we're going to depend on the public to participate in the production of those recommendations and then comment on them before they're final.
Who are the experts? Do you have any lined up that you plan to talk to?
So as part of this process, we are putting together a task force. So we will be partnering with our local utilities, Ameren, Missouri American Water, and also looking at some developers who have worked in this space to understand some of the constraints and some of the issues that other jurisdictions have been putting together. And we will be having that task force that will be addressing a lot of those questions.
What about residents? Will they, I mean,
Yes.
I know they'll have a voice, but what about on the task force? Are they going to be part of it?
That's a really great question. I haven't determined the entire makeup of the task force. I really appreciate that question, though.
Yeah, our planning commission, who will vote on this, is made up of residents of St. Louis County who are experts in the different aspects of development and have a pretty good track record of balancing the competing interests on the land use question. Any other questions?
Are you ready for questions off topic?
Sure.
The council's ethics committee meets at noon.
Yes.
Supposedly they're going to be presenting evidence.
Well, there are some people who just can't comprehend why someone would help other people and not get paid for it. And they're really struggling with that. They're struggling with understanding medical billing, where a responsible physician is reported by name but isn't paid. And I hope that all of the people they're talking to will help them understand that.
If I could ask you just pointedly though, because if you're working with somebody who's under anesthesia, you couldn't leave them responsibly. Did you work on anesthesia patients during a time where the county was doing business, during county business hours?
Yeah, so the question is, can I provide anesthesia supervisory coverage and still answer the phone? And as an anesthesiologist, we take a lot of phone calls about scheduling, about the next patient, about the last patient in the recovery room. What we do as an anesthesiologist is juggle a lot of phone calls, including being responsible for a patient or two patients who are under anesthesia. We manage other anesthesia professionals who are in the room with the patient, and we're in the room for the critical portions of the anesthetic, and we remain immediately available during that case, between patients, between the recovery room, seeing the next patient. And that's what an anesthesiologist does. If I have to take a phone call that's more than short duration, then I would simply ask one of another anesthesiologist to watch out for my patients while I took that call. That hasn't happened.
So to be clear then, you did work, but under a volunteer capacity, you're saying, during county business hours?
Yes, I've been working as a volunteer without being compensated, taking care of patients. And it's hard for some people to understand why someone would take care of patients or do any volunteer work and not get paid for it. That's a philosophical question. But yes, yeah, my job as county executive is 24/7. Sometimes I sleep, sometimes I do other things, sometimes I travel, sometimes I represent St. Louis County outside of St. Louis County. It's a 24/7 job,
So you
and
have
I'm
to-
always available by phone.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You wouldn't have any reason to dispute, they say you work 32 Mondays on a single year.
I don't know how many Mondays I worked in a single year. It's about twice a month, so that's probably about right. But I'm a volunteer. It's consistent with the charter. Historically, the council members have expressed that they have no concerns about my volunteer work, my volunteer participation, but this is a very sort of conflict-driven political environment, from Washington, D.C., from our world wars to state government to local government, and sometimes positions evolve based on the opportunity for conflict, and that's part of what we're dealing with. But I'm very comfortable with supporting my local community as a volunteer, as county executives always have. My background is unique, so my volunteer work perhaps is a little bit different than others, but I would encourage everyone to volunteer. This is a pretty philanthropic town with a rich history in volunteering for your community, and although my volunteer participation is unique, it's not unusual.
After you leave office, do you plan to go back to getting paid as an anesthesiologist?
I haven't really thought about that. It's on the list of possibilities. I have a very diverse background. There's a lot of things I could do. You know, I have a farm in southern Missouri. I spend some time there on weekends. I may volunteer as an anesthesiologist. I may work part-time. I don't know. I may take on another venture, but what I will do for the first 3 or 4 months is take some time off. It's been a very busy 7, almost 8 years, and I've learned a great deal. It's been an honor to be county executive, but I would say that my skill set is diverse, and I'll think about that sometime in the middle of next year.
One of the things that council members have said now, I mean, you talked about positions evolving. Now their position is, well, it doesn't matter if you're a volunteer, you're still violating the charter because you're spending time, you're not dedicating your entire full time as a county executive. What's your response to that?
Well, unfortunately, we're in a very intense conflict environment, and if there's an opportunity for conflict, positions will evolve, and that's where we are. But with the rules that are in place, I've lived by those rules. Some folks can't understand why someone would volunteer and not get paid, but most people in St. Louis County do. And my volunteer work is unique, but that's because my background is unique. And I'm very comfortable with that. And most people are. You know, we've got elections in the next few months, and that tends to turn up the temperature on conflict harvesting. And we'll just ride it out and see what happens. In the meantime, we're going to make St. Louis County run. There's a lot of important work to do, and I'm proud of the work we're doing.
Say they were to begin the process of trying to remove you from office during this. I mean, as you said, you're not running for re-election. You're on limited time at this point. Would that process even be resolved by the time your tenure as county executive would be done?
It sounds like an imaginary process. So you're asking me to respond to an imaginary process, and I don't know what that is exactly. But if we see, if they could vote me off the island, I'm sure they would have done it a long time ago, because that would be, you know, conflict theater. But in between all of this stuff that gets attention, we're doing some pretty good work in St. Louis County. We're recognized by Forbes magazine as one of America's best employers. We're taking pretty good care of our residents. We've got a pretty good police department, and things were getting a lot better in the jail before the budget cuts. Our health department is now an FQHC lookalike and is making money. I think a lot of things are going in the right direction, and we pass a lot of legislation in on the council that we all agree on. The attention is on conflict, and it's not unique to St. Louis County. It's in state government. In Washington, D.C., we had the longest shutdown in the history of our country, which is conflict. So conflict feeds attention, and attention is like a drug in some political circles. And this is one opportunity. So when we get close to election cycles, folks hunt for conflict. And that's part of what we're going through. It'll be okay. It's happening all over the country. We're still going to make county run, and our government's still going to work. And the voters will decide if that is a value that's important to them. If they do, they will reward it. If they don't, then they'll send somebody else to represent them.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks.